Welcome to the B2B Digitized Podcast, where leaders of B2B technology startups and scale-ups learn how to use digital transformation to differentiate, educate, build trust, improve competitive positioning, close sales faster without compromise, and scale revenue growth. Now here's your host, Joshua Feinberg from SP Home Run.
Hi, it's Joshua Feinberg from the B2B Digitized Podcast, and I have with me today a very special guest and good friend, Cynthia Terpstra, who is head of marketing at ReadyWorks. Cynthia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joshua. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for coming on the show. The first place I think it would be super helpful to start is to give a little bit about your background of how you ended up in your current role leading marketing at ReadyWorks, what ReadyWorks does, what were some of the prior steps along your career journey that got you to where you are.
Okay, sure. I spent most of my career in B2B marketing, starting with, communications company, actually AT&T, and working in everything in B2B from, the Fortune 500 to startup to kind of everything in between. So really that background in B2B, but I've also worked in B2C and actually some nonprofit work as well. I've actually also worked in, every functional area there is in marketing, product marketing, content strategy, digital marketing, PR, and then, ultimately putting it all together to drive the demand gen and lead gen campaign. So taking all those different functional areas, putting together, and then having something that really drives revenue for companies. And that's kind of having that background is what led me to ReadyWorks. And I really discovered over the last several years that I really enjoy working for SaaS companies. It was one of those things I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it till I really thought about it. And I'm a problem solver by nature. So working with a company that has a solution to tackle a problem that everybody's facing in their real life, their daily work life, really appeals to me. So that's kind of how I ended up at ReadyWorks and joined that team.
That's terrific. What I found is super interesting too, is when you think about the nature of the problems that you tackle on a marketing team in a relatively small company that's got a few dozen employees compared to a Fortune 1000 with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees. There's business problems you're solving, but they definitely have a different context. And I've had similar kinds of experience of working with some huge Fortune 1000 companies earlier on in my career and startups a little more recently. How has that kind of changed your outlook of being able to see both sides of the puzzle, depending on whether it's a huge marketing organization or a marketing team of one or just in the single digits?
It's funny. When you're part of a large team, obviously you have more to draw on and more resources to lean on, and you can build a deeper bench. But, the thrill of being kind of a small company too, who's new entrant to the market, creating something out of nothing, creating a new category of products or services, and really figuring out how you're going to do that, starting small, building from there, leveraging what you've got. There's a lot of appeal to that, for me. And, it still comes down to how do you build that team and how do you work with what you've got, taking what you know and you can do well, and then how do you bring in additional resources, for example, through freelancers or through agencies that can kind of fill some of those gaps that even if you have the skill set to do it, it's impossible to do it all, right? So you have to leverage that expertise. You have to know who to go to help build that team as you continue to grow.
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation too of thinking of, yes, it's good to be able to play all of the different positions, but it's really not all that. But you take like a baseball team, for example, they have the concept of a super utility player who can play 6 or 7 different positions. But the key thing is they can't play all 6 or 7 positions. If the second baseman is on the injured list and they're covering there, they aren't going to be a very effective emergency catcher or center fielder.
Exactly. It's exactly. And knowing where you can be that utility player, but also knowing, that the analogy you gave is great. When do you say, okay, this is a role I'm playing today, and here's who I can leverage to do those other things, and building that roster, star players who can really help you win the game, so to speak, if we're going to use a baseball analogy.
Yeah, you never know what happens. Our hometown baseball team, best of intentions, I think there's 4 or 5 of their star players that are in one shape or form injured. So you have your whole farm system, which had a challenge last year with the whole minor league system being shut down. So one of the big areas I wanted to ask you about is when you think about your career experience, when somebody approaches you that's early on in their career and they're just getting into B2B digital, maybe you know them through your professional network, maybe it's someone that's an alumni from your school that was introduced, and they reach out to you and they're looking for advice on what they should be thinking about earlier on in their career to get into B2B digital marketing.
I'm a firm believer in it all starts with the customer. It all starts with really listening to them, really understand who they are, what problem are they trying to solve, what are their pain points, how would their work life improve if you could eliminate those pain points, where do they go for information, who do they trust to make their decisions, and how do you want to engage with them? It really starts there. You really have to get to know that customer, understand what makes them tick, understand, why they would even have a need for your solution, but really start with the listening. And I think that's something that's kind of become a lost art form in many areas of our lives today. But it's so crucial and it's so important, because if you don't start there and you don't really understand the customer and you don't really listen to what they're telling you, all the tactics in the world aren't going to help you. They're all going to fall flat.
Yeah, the thing is, everyone's today looking for a quick fix. Come on, there's got to be an app that allows you to just get all of the customer insight and magically get to figure out the whole go-to-market strategy. And reminds me of the Lean Startup book with the guy that there's no answers in the building, no matter how much you whiteboard and brainstorm and kick that around internally. Maybe between marketing and sales and customer success and product, you can figure out like 20-25% of it, but the marketplace is always so much smarter than we are, and many times they'll help us figure out where our shortcomings are.
Yeah, and it changes. Look how much has changed in the past year. Everybody had to pivot, and if you're not really listening to your customers and not asking them the questions and probing to really understand a little bit more, day in the life for them, you're not going to come up with, the marketing tactics you need to help solve the problem for them, but you also may miss an opportunity, something you never even considered. It might give you pause and say, you know what, let's pivot, let's try something different. It wasn't even in your headspace, but those kind of things come out in the conversations.
Yeah, that's a real big one. A lot of times when I'm working with entrepreneurs that have a startup and they may think they're getting closer to product market fit, but they're definitely still trying to figure out go-to-market fit and product market fit. And they're like, well, walk me through what a typical timeline looks like. Walk me through what expectations look like. I'm like, look, if you get this content and thought leadership thing right, obviously the first priority is to get more closed won deals. And then everyone in sales always says the second best answer is no. But there's a really interesting thing that I find that happens in this space too, where people can say, I love what your company is about. I love the content that you're putting out there. Look, let me give you the inside track here. There's one feature that you're missing. And if your product team can go back and build this, I'm signed up like yesterday and I have 5 buddies in similar companies. So I think what a lot of people miss out on startups is really good content marketing, really good thought leadership actually helps them figure out many times the customer insight, because essentially their early customers help them become product consultants too.
Oh, absolutely. We see that all the time. It's continuing to refine that based on the need they've brought to us and continue to enhance the product. But as you mentioned also the content strategy, where we start, and then, the more presentations, the more conversations we have with customers, understanding, what, it might be a little different than we thought, or, maybe the opportunity isn't here, it's over here. So it's that constant refinement, refining what you have, and then also listening to say, maybe this is a new opportunity. This is something we should be talking about, because this is a real world situation they're dealing with, and they need content that helps them solve that. So, you kind of then reprioritize. I know I'm constantly, reprioritizing what content is next on deck to get produced based on these conversations that we have with our customers. So it's a balancing act between, what's the SEO opportunity to get yourself discovered, get your website discovered, versus what our customers really looking for at the moment that maybe Google hasn't caught up to. So it's a balancing act at all times.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much more than just that shifting dynamic of people doing so much more research online and not wanting to talk to the sales teams till they're 60, 70, 80% of the way. It's getting the leadership to see just how much value marketing can add, not only in early stages of the journey, but throughout the whole sales enablement and customer marketing, post onboarding and product marketing. It really is such a key driver with digital transformation.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, I think, a lot of us have heard the stats, but I, saw it again just recently where B2B customers will consume, I've heard, up to 13 pieces of content before they ever want to engage with your sales team. And of that 13, 8 is created, in-house or, created by you to push out, to your site for customers. And then 5 of the 13 is content that's discovered on third-party sites. So again, it's just so important to have that information and have it available at the right time, at the right place, when your customer is, actively looking for that kind of solution, or they didn't even realize there was a solution to their problem. So making sure that content gets discovered, kind of in the background when they didn't even realize, and they're reading about something else, and then it pops up in their feed, and they're like, hey, wait, what's that? What do you mean I can do this?
I think too, there's like a really important role that marketing can play in reprogramming sales professionals and how to deal with all of this. Because if you're a salesperson where you have access to a platform like HubSpot and you can go in and see every single blog post that they've read, every email that they've opened and clicked on, the webinars they've attended, the videos they've watched, like if you're going to a sales appointment and you don't take 5 or 10 minutes to use the X-ray vision to, I always say there's like explicit stuff that they know that they've told you. They know they've told you their first, last, and email, their company size, and a few other things like that. But then there's all this great behavioral data that really can help weave a story about it's not like what are the buttons to push, but like what are they really struggling with beyond what they told you about themselves. It's similar to if you look at someone's LinkedIn profile and you see patterns of the kind of content they've shared in the last couple of weeks or the events they've attended.
Yeah, that is so important. I'm so glad you brought that up. Because you see that all the time. Everybody wants the quick sale, the quick conversation, and doing that kind of research, it's there. And if you take the time to really, again, get to know your customer and see how they're consuming your content, what seems to be important to them, it changes the shape of the conversation. They don't see it as a sales pitch and, okay, here we go, Mr. Salesman, you're trying to sell me to, wait a minute, okay, you get it. You understand what I'm up against, tell me more. And that's just so important in shifting the conversation.
Getting them out of the sales role, all the negative stereotypes that people have about sales professionals, getting them out of the vendor box and into more of that doctor-patient relationship where they're seen as a consultant, an educator, and subject matter expert. When sales teams embrace that, it's awesome. When sales teams are fighting it in this day and age, it's painful to watch. They're cultural. I talk about the importance of like getting the CEO on board so this trickles from the top down. Obviously, it's way more practical in a company with a few dozen employees than it is in a company with tens of thousands of employees, and it's probably more a division director or someone that some kind of executive sponsor that rolls up. But these are big cultural changes.
Yeah, and it's funny, you see it all the time. We've all gotten the sales pitches. My email is flooded daily with the pitches, and the good ones will work. The other ones where it's just, again, going for that quick pitch, not taking the time to really understand who this customer is and why they may have even come to you in the first place, you miss so many opportunities there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's great advice for someone that's just getting started in B2B. What about somebody that's been doing B2B marketing for 10 or 20 years and maybe the last year has been really hard on them, their company, maybe there was a lot of turnover on their team, a lot of churn among customers, and they're feeling a sense of burnout. What would you help a peer or colleague like that who reached out to you that was looking for some advice on helping them to recharge the batteries?
Honestly, I'd say it's a lot of the same advice. It starts with the listening. It starts with reacquainting yourself with your customer. Even if you've been doing this a long time, as you said, sometimes you get to a certain point where you're so engrossed in the tactics and you're so engrossed in the analytics, you forgot who the customer is. It's just they become a number, and you forgot what it's like to have a conversation with them and really hear them, talk about what their work life is like, where do you fit into that puzzle? And, what are some of the things that now that they're considering that maybe they weren't considering in the beginning. And there's just so much that you can pick up on in these conversations, not only in terms of your marketing strategies, but those aha moments, right? And I'm a firm believer in there's so much to learn outside your own industry and so much to take away from, other experiences that you may think never, are relevant to what you're doing, but they are, or it's just that spark of creativity that you weren't planning on that comes out of nowhere because you were listening and you were paying attention and, thinking that things may be differently than you did before. So kind of taking that mental break and coming at it maybe from a different angle than you've been doing it before. So I think, again, those basics of really listening are so important. I think the other thing too, in this day and age, marketing has shifted so much. It's become so sophisticated, so specialized. So, getting back to our analogy earlier, you really have to, you can't do it all. You cannot be an expert in everything now in marketing. You're an SEO expert, or you're an advertising expert, or you're a content creation expert, or, you're an analytics person. So again, try to learn as much as you can, try to really understand how all the pieces, work together, but then leverage the expertise of people who have really gone deep in each of these topics and learn how to put together a good team, to really, really be effective.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic insight, especially for startups where the role is like somewhere between the general manager of a sports team and like a portfolio manager, where you're trying to make sure that they're not overweighted in one area. For baseball fans, I always say, like, imagine if all your payroll was concentrated in the bullpen and in your bench players. So like the pitchers that would start the games, like, were you relying on minor league talent, same thing with people swinging the bat. So it's important. It's the same thing with like a portfolio, where people tend to have more aggressive portfolios when they're in their 20s and just starting out. And as they get closer to retirement, it tends to become more conservative. So it's like, okay, how do you decide how much to put into content versus SEO versus search versus paid social, paid search, conversion rate optimization, website building, brand building, field marketing. I was just reminded yesterday, people are starting to pound the table on events again, that in a lot of B2B tech companies, 40% of budgets go to conferences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny, again, another great example of, we had to think of things differently in the past year with everybody working remotely and not having in-person events. It was really fun to see how many different companies of all different sizes and shapes and industries, got creative in still creating those customer experiences and having some fun with it, too. So we're going to have a more small, intimate gathering, and maybe we're going to do a wine and cheese tasting, and send out those kinds of things to the customers in advance and make it a little more fun. And I think to a certain degree, people really appreciated that because it was different. We all get, as you said, a certain amount of burnout at a certain stage. So again, looking for a different way of doing things, or even now, you always hear people say, oh, we're going to go old school. We're going to go back to doing it this way. Well, it's because we all get burnout at a certain point, and we all recognize, the marketing tactics for what they are, and they become so overused at a certain point that you're like, oh, you just start to tune it out. So, I think there's a lot of great opportunity there if you're just willing to kind of, take that fresh approach and really listen to your customers and other folks who are out there and see how you can do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think keeping it fresh, keeping it relevant is so critical to stand out, to differentiate, to compete for attention. Like when I hear people make blanket statements like email marketing is dead or webinars are oversaturated or whatever, it's like, yes, in the year we are in right now, you're definitely not innovative by being the first one on your block to have a good segmented email nurturing campaign or have a good effective webinar program, but they still largely work. The key thing is the messaging, the value, the segmentation, understanding what actually helps someone as opposed to helping yourself. That's the whole, like, they're all the time listening to the what's in it for me channel.
Yeah. Always be helpful. Always be listening. Always be helpful. And it comes down to execution. You can take the same tactic and you can see it work really well because it was executed well, or you can see it fall flat on its face. It's, again, all how you put it together, how it relates back to your customer versus, how can I just spin something and get it out there quickly and hope it works? It's like, do it right. It's better to take a moment and really think through it and do it right than to just rush to get it done and on to the next thing, or use the easiest, fastest approach possible.
How does your approach with a lot of this change depending on whether you're building out strategy for early stage, like awareness stage prospects versus people that are more in the middle of the funnel, middle of their journey at the consideration, and then in the later decision stages? Do you find that a lot of the companies you work with have an appreciation for those differences, and how do you tend to come at all that?
I think you have to look still at the buyer's journey, the different stages of, like content creation or what you're going to do for them, the different touch points. But then also recognize it's not a linear path, that customers, it's a very much squirrely kind of a path as they go through and they consume content and then they circle back. Not to mention B2B is a long sales cycle. It can be anywhere from a few months to a few years, depending on your industry and what you're doing. So you have to keep creating content that they want to come back for, even if it's not immediately. The fact that they know that you're a trusted provider of the content, that what you're giving them is helpful and helps them understand what you offer a little bit better, they'll come back. And so constantly getting that out there, again, so like in the awareness stage, if you're creating the content, you have to put it out there, one, on your own site, and make sure you're using the very best in terms of SEO strategies to make sure the content gets discovered, but also putting that content out there when they're not actively searching for it, but it pops up in their feed or on the site that they go to regularly for consuming content. And then I think also it's about creating that content in multiple different formats. So right now, people really are overwhelmed with a lot of content. They know it's out there. They know there's tons of resources they can go to, but sometimes they have the time to really dive deep into it and really research it, really understand it. Other times they're looking for that quick format that they consume quickly. So having the content available, in video and podcasts, and then of course written content, it all works together, and you're putting it out there so you're offering it on their terms, offering it in a way that they consume it the way they want to, when they're ready to. So I think continuing to develop all that and make sure that's available is very important. And then, of course, in the middle stages, pushing a little bit further with information that digs a little deeper and helps them understand how others maybe are using the product or service, to then the later stage where you're really giving them those details, not only in terms of the very specific product details, but also helping them understand how you compare to any competitors, if there's any competitors in the space. So again, things like third-party reviews on review sites are critical. Getting analysts to recognize your solution, getting others to talk about your solution, all very important in the buyer's journey. The other thing too, I'd like to say that gets overlooked a lot is the delight stage. I know other folks call it that as well, but it gets overlooked so often. Everybody, again, they're just pushing things out, hoping to land that, marketing qualified lead, the sales, all that. But really, you're creating that customer experience, from very, very, very first touch through long after the sale. What are you like to do business with? Are you creating the content after you've made the sale that helps them onboard quickly, help them really navigate your product, make it easy for them to use it? Are you giving them additional things that maybe extends into other areas of what they're trying to tackle for their business? And are you measuring that? Are you using a net promoter score to see how do they feel about what it's like to do business with your company? Because understanding that, sharing that with your organization, having the conversations around what feedback you get from that is so critical in understanding how you continue to refine everything you do as a marketer. And then using that to say, hey, we have someone who has been really just delighted with everything that we've been doing in terms of how we've been servicing them. And that becomes a great opportunity to ask them to, provide a review on the site, to do a testimonial, to, talk about your product or service with your peers. We still, I think referral is so important. And, we get that. We have happy customers who really enjoy working with us, and they tell, their peers in different industries, and that's, we all trust that, right? Who are you going to trust? Somebody you've never met that just has done very well in terms of popping up on a search engine, or somebody you really respect in your field, who says, you know what, this has been a great experience working with this company. Not only did they have the product that met my needs, but man, every conversation I had with them, from the CEO down to the project manager helping me onboard, has been just so positive. They're so easy to work with. Their attention to detail is so important. Just what gets them coming back and gets them to share that story with other customers.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. One of the interesting things with SaaS companies that I've leaned on more heavily the last couple of years too is not only the formal reviews on the sites, on the review sites, but drafting those same people, or at least the ones that are interested, to come on podcasts, to be on webinar panels. So not only are they providing positive social proof, but they're helping to become subject matter experts and thought leaders, and like co-marketing as an extension of your company. And there's definitely varying degrees of enthusiasm with helping to spread that content. Beyond that, in some cases, their marketing teams will heavily announce and promote that client is going to be on a webinar panel with you on their social media. Some of them will write blog posts about it. I've seen some cases where they even treat it as similar to PR, where they put it in a blog post and like a media mention. But I've found as a really, really interesting social proof opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We were getting ready actually to launch a few that have recorded some webinars with our customers. Yeah, who do you want to hear from? Do you want to hear from the customer who used this to solve a problem and to really talk about their experience, or do you want to hear a sales pitch? And, having that customer be able to talk about it is so important and so meaningful, beyond what we can do. Not everything we do as a marketer, of course, has value, but again, it's just that third party credibility, that's everything. And so getting every single touch point right with a customer is so critical, because that's how you get to that final stage.
I look at when you're planning your own live events, when you're planning your own webinars, there's like two report card kind of things going on. Like the landing page and the promotional materials that you're using to drive the registrations is very analogous to putting in an application to speak at a conference, where you have like the show manager and the advisory committee that's vetting your background and vetting your slides, because they certainly want to make sure that you're providing value, and then it's not going to be a pitch. And then like the second part of that is, I always tell people, imagine that you want your webinar to be so valuable that if it was at a big conference, that there's no doubt in your mind that people would hit the mobile app afterwards, and you would have one of the highest rated sessions in the entire conference out of dozens and dozens of sessions that are there. So there's like no doubt in your mind that you're going to get invited back next year. And the analogy on that is like the surveys, the polling responses, how many people are receptive to your CTA, but there's so many parallels there. As people don't want to attend an infomercial, they want to learn.
Absolutely. And the more you build a reputation for being that kind of person, that kind of company, providing that useful content, the more they're going to come back, because they trust you. They know that you're trying to help, right? So yeah, that's great insights, I think.
It's interesting too, is that when people are relatively new to doing webinars, there's a lot of anxiety and like, am I going to do this the right way? What mistakes should I avoid? I always say, like, okay, if you have a 60-minute webinar and you look down and like the average session time at the end was 20 minutes, something was really messed up. If you look down, you're like, the average person stayed 57 minutes, you did awesome. Because unlike a physical event, there's nothing remotely rude about someone just exiting out and leaving if you turn someone off and they feel like they're wasting their time. It's just so much higher of a bar to provide value and keep people's attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you see as some of the bigger mistakes, or what do you think is the biggest mistake that you see people making with their B2B marketing playbook?
I think if I had to wrap it up under one umbrella, I'd say trying everything at once. I think you have to start with what you can manage and manage that well. Build from there. We have so many tools and technology available to us today, but you can't do everything at once and do it well. So start what you can manage, start with the basics, and go from there. And it's funny how often I see the basics overlooked. Start with your ideal customer profile. You can't be everything to everyone. So, who is your buyer? Who has the greatest need for your solution? how does your company fit into that equation? What's the best fit for your company? Is it a small enterprise? Is it a large enterprise? Is it a specific vertical? Really understand that ideal customer profile. Spell it out, give it some thought, and then of course circle back constantly to say, were we right? Or, is there a whole other audience we hadn't even considered? Because that happens all the time. You think and then all of a sudden some other customers start coming along and say, well, this is interesting. We didn't think, there'd be as much of a need over here, but it turns out there is. So, again, always be listening, always be, watching out for those kinds of signals. I think, again, some of the basics and getting, things in order are, look at your website, look at, what you're doing from a digital perspective. Make sure everything is spot on. So, when you're looking at your website, is it easy to navigate? Are visitors hanging out to learn more by spending more time on the site? Are they coming back? Or are they just kind of a one-trick pony? They come in, they come out, maybe you got their attention the first time, but then that's the last you ever hear from them. Test your website. Make sure that, it renders correctly across all the browsers, all the devices, all the basic kind of technical things that, shockingly, I see get overlooked all the time. It looks good in one browser and then you test it somewhere else and, things aren't working properly or it doesn't look good on mobile, whatever. Really just make sure you get those basics right. Because again, it's all about that customer experience and what's their first impression of you. So, and having a consistent tone of voice across, from one page to another, to different blog posts, keeping it all together, make them feel like, this is really good experience for them. Again, kind of as you build on, the basics and what you can do, having a good content strategy. We talked about that before, but, give them useful information, give them something that they're going to want to come back for, and then give it to them in multiple formats. I mentioned video before, but it's interesting. I saw an article, just the other day too, they mentioned that 68% of folks want to watch video. That's their number one preferred format of content. In addition, the article mentioned that sites that include video are 50 times more likely to rank in organic search results than sites that don't have that. And again, why? Because people want to consume video content. Google knows that, and they're going to push the pages that have video higher in the rankings than the pages that do not. So that becomes so important. Think about your social media. Are you being like the person who just talks about themselves all the time at a party? Or are you pushing out, content that's educational, that's helpful, that's really meant to help people understand how they can solve a problem? Or even just, fun, get them to know a little bit more about your organization, get to know them, engage with them. And then, as you build more tactics, things like advertising, don't try to do everything at once. Start with one or two channels. Make sure you refine it. Make sure you see, is your audience spot on who you're going after? What's working? Do you need to kind of change the mix of, which channels you're advertising on? And then how do you grow from there? So don't try to tackle everything at once. But, start small and continue to grow as you start to see the results and you start to understand what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, I think that's where the customer insight, the buyer persona research can be so helpful on narrowing down the short list. Otherwise, you just constantly get these random requests all the time. Like, hey, how come we're not doing anything on Clubhouse? Well, we just refreshed our buyer persona research 3 weeks ago, and not one person out of 15 we looked at mentioned Clubhouse. So maybe we'll look at it again in another 6 months, but let's get the basics first. Let's get the tried and true YouTube podcasting stuff that we know they actually did mention working, and then we'll circle back to that. Always, should we be on TikTok?
Yeah, what fits for your audience? Exactly. What's the right fit for your buyer persona? And candidly, the decision makers are going to be different versus other folks in the organization. So make sure you understand the person who's the influencer, the person who's the decision maker, kind of the folks in between, and make sure you're speaking in marketing to those personas correctly. You're gonna market differently to a CIO than you're gonna market to a program manager. So make sure you understand that, make sure you've mapped it out, which tactics and messaging aligns with each, and go from there. It's so critical. Plus, let's face it, we all have budgets, so you can't be effective in tackling everything at once if you're still living within a budget. Great if you have millions of dollars to throw at something. Of course, that makes it easier. But the real world is most of us are working within a budget. So being very intentional with your spend and everything you do is critical. See what works and continue to grow and continue to evolve. But be realistic with what you can manage, both from a financial perspective and from a team perspective.
It's always such a challenging conversation too with companies that are new to content to get them to see that, like, this ebook or this webinar that we're doing that's doing well now, there's a really good chance that people are still going to get a lot of value from downloading or watching this recording like 6, 12, 18, 24 months out. So if you're trying to figure out what the ROI is going to be 3 days or 3 weeks after the launch, you're completely missing on that. Like a typical company that's all in on content marketing gets 80 or 90% of their leads from things they didn't do that month.
Yeah. It's we say that all the time in our company. It's quality over quantity, right? One meaningful lead that really aligns with your buyer persona, really has a true need for your product, is better than 500 leads that don't. It's make it meaningful, make it valuable. For both sides. For both the customers and for the company. Make sure it's a good fit. Make sure it's a good marriage. And think of it that way, not in terms, not just, how much can we drive, but how much value can we provide and how do we grow in a meaningful way.
I spent so much time talking about like LTV, not as much about cost of acquisition that early on in startups, because in a lot of cases, you're still just running a lot of experiments, but the size of the average deal that they envision being able to close and how long that customer sticks and what the expansion drives such an amount, it definitely influences the potential for where you can make the investments versus not. I mean, if you're managing a SaaS company that's selling something on their website for $19 a month or something like that, you better be able to run something that looks a lot more like e-commerce than selling to mid-market or enterprise companies with 5-figure and 6-figure deals.
Exactly.
Cynthia, when you think about where we are right now, when you look at what's going on and you think ahead with an 18-month, 24-month time horizon, where do you think we're headed next?
I think, from a technology perspective, we will continue to use AI to really help shape the customer experience, being able to provide that self-service experience, through chatbots or, pushing out, content that they're really aligns with what they're looking for. So really, high personalization, high autonomy, I think is very important for the customers. And we'll see much more of that, especially as the technology gets better and better and smarter, and we roll it out appropriately as marketers. I think, again, that's the caution of doing it right instead of jumping on something because it's available to you, but then creating an experience that doesn't really work or frustrating the customer. I think we'll continue to get better and better at that, and leverage what's available to really help improve the customer experience on their terms. Provide what they're looking for. I think too, conversely, especially for digital marketing, I think it's going to be interesting to watch the next couple of years as privacy becomes more and more of an issue. The customers that we work with, especially you see in like B2B or tech savvy customers, they know, they know what marketing's doing. They know how to get around of some of what we're pushing out there. And of course, then there's, the legislation that can make it even more difficult in terms of how you collect information and how to use it. So, thinking about that, how do you really get the information out to them, working within the confines of, privacy issues, and then also, giving them the information in a way that they don't feel like you're taking advantage of knowing that they've been to your site, or it's just so obvious that it's being, marketed to for the sake of marketing versus, again, going back to the listening, really, if somebody's going to give up their email to you, they know they're going to get marketed to. So make sure then what you do next is just so meaningful for them, that they're willing to see more of the marketing and know that you're, that you're now pushing remarketing ads in front of them, that you're going to send them emails, whatever you're doing, make sure that it's just very, it really just hits the mark each and every time.
So much is wrapped up in trust. So when you think about like the customer experience and using AI to improve it, that customer experience really starts long before they become customers. It's like the stores, or if you go looking for a new home or something, where you go into a parking lot and it says parking for future customers of, future residents of. If you envision that every prospect that's a good fit is potentially a future customer or future partner, and you make the investments and treat them like that, I always say, like, it's super important. Especially, I talk with a lot of people about LinkedIn. They're like, oh, well, I hate when people connect with me on LinkedIn and I'm initially getting pitched back immediately. I'm like, yeah, they totally don't get it. It's like walking up to someone that you just met and proposing that you elope on the very first conversation. You could see Ashton Kutcher making a really funny movie about that, but in real life, it doesn't necessarily play out with the experience that most buyers that are on a considered sales process are going to look like with a B2B tech company.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, that's such a great, a saying. We say it all the time. It's like, listen, I just met you. I want to date you a little bit first before I marry you.
Trust.
And the other
it's all about trust.
It's all about trust. And then, I like to say too, for marketers, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's like, what's the fastest way to ruin something? Throw a bunch of marketers at it, right? Because it's like, oh, this is the latest and greatest technique. So next thing you know, all the marketers are pouncing on it. And consumers, they're smart, right? They recognize it. They know, oh, great, I'm going to give you my email because that's the only way to get this content. But now I can expect to get, an email every 2 days from you. Or I'm going to be chased all over the website with your remarketing ads. It's like, okay, again, be thoughtful, be conscious in everything you do so you create this positive experience. Because if the experience is great and they feel like, everything you did was built on best of intentions for serving them, from before the sale to long after the sale, they're going to continue to engage with you. But if, the first thing they do results in being pounced on by sales, they're going to quickly exit out, and you're not going to get them back. So, again, keeping those customers you do have, keeping them happy, making them feel like you constantly want to hear from them and you want to know how you can improve, they're going to talk about you. They're going to become your advocates. So pay attention to them.
Yeah. And even just how sales interacts with early stage prospects, I'm constantly reminding people that just because they downloaded a white paper doesn't mean they're ready for a demo and ready for a conversation. The one thing you know is they downloaded the white paper and they wrote in something about a free form question, like what's the biggest challenge around this topic or whatever. Talk to them about that. Yes, it requires that you read the white paper before you talk to them. They're expecting that you're the expert. So yes, it's a package deal, but you know what they expressed interest in. Start there.
Right. Well, it's so funny because I won't name the company. It's a big one, but I honestly was just consuming content because I was just curious about some of the content that they were producing. Plus, candidly, they were a competitor for a former company. So I like to check out what they were doing. And I got hounded so much and so often by their salespeople calling me, emailing me, LinkedIn. And I had to say to them, listen, guys, I'm a marketer. I know how this works. Please put a note in your CRM. I'm not a prospect. Just take me out because I'm not going to buy. So let's save ourselves some time and know that, and make sure everybody else on the sales team know that. Quit hitting me up for sale because it's not going to happen. So, put your effort elsewhere.
It's the don't call me, I'll call you AI hack of the system figuring out that, oh, okay, I know the persona, I know the content.
Yeah.
We'll know when there's a hand-raising motion going on. This wasn't it.
Right.
Well, Cynthia, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast with me. This has been super helpful, insightful. I know our viewers and listeners and readers will get a lot of value from this. What's the best way for someone to reach out to you if they have any questions or want to connect with you? Are you active on LinkedIn?
I'm very active on LinkedIn,
Okay.
Watching it constantly, oversee our social channels too. So constantly on LinkedIn, but just, be very transparent on why you are reaching out to me, because as you said, I get bombarded all day long with the sales, I want to connect with you, but it's a sales pitch. So yeah, LinkedIn is a great way to get in touch with me and just, start the conversation there.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been super helpful. I wish you all the best in continuing to do great things with ReadyWorks and to help build up great companies by using innovative, disruptive digital marketing and great customer experience.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Joshua.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Cynthia.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the B2B Digitized Podcast. To subscribe and leave a review, check us out at b2bdigitized.com or wherever you like to consume podcast episodes, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube.